Welcome to our second to last STEM Lyceums webinar for the season. We have our last session next week, and then we're going to take a break for the summer and come back in the fall when the school year starts. Real quick, before we get into our whole kit and caboodle when it comes to STEM Lyceums, I'm going to quickly drop a Google form in the chat. For those of you that have been to STEM Lyceums or have seen our recordings, if you could just fill out that quick little survey for me, that would be awesome. It's just some feedback about the webinars that you saw this spring and in fall with Devin, just to get some of that feedback so that we can improve our programming and just see what we did well this year. So that would be wonderful. Thank you so much. All right, so now let's go ahead and get started. The Fundamentals of Financial Literacy, our second to last episode of STEM Lyceums for the spring. As usual, I'm going to go into some overview about CEE. So CEE, or the Center for Excellence in Education, was founded in 1983 by Joanne DeGennaro and the late Admiral H.D. Rickover, who is the father of the nuclear navy and civilian uses of nuclear power. The mission here at CEE is to nurture high school and university scholars to careers of excellence and leadership in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, or STEM, and to encourage international collaboration between and among leaders in the global community. We have 4 fabulous programs here right now at CEE, the first of which is the Research Science Institute, or RSI. RSI is a highly competitive 6-week summer science and engineering program open to rising high school seniors. Juniors are eligible to apply. RSI is the first cost-free summer science and engineering program that combines on-campus coursework in scientific theory with off-campus work in science and technology research. Then we have the U.S. Biolympiad, or USABO. USABO is the premier U.S. biology education testing program for high school students. It provides the motivation, curricular resources, and skills training to take them beyond their classroom experience to the level of international competitiveness. Since CEE began administering the USABO in 2003, every member of the U.S. Biolympiad team has medaled at the IBO. Next, we have our 2 newest initiatives here at CEE. We have the Teacher Enrichment Program, or TEP. TEP provides opportunities for middle and high school teachers to connect with leading experts from industry and academia, explore cutting-edge research and development, and make meaningful professional links with direct benefits for teachers and their students. And finally, there is STEM Lyceums, us, woohoo! A virtual club for high school students to meet once a month and learn about STEM career pathways from leading field experts. Industry professionals share cutting-edge research and offer unique learning experiences like scholarships and internship opportunities for high achievers. Go ahead and check out those links if you want to learn more about our program, or you can directly go to our website, www.cee.org. As usual, we'll review our Zoom norms. First, yes, if you're new here and you have this burning question, a recording of the session will be sent to all registrants. So if you have any time commitments and you can't stay for the entirety of the webinar, a recording will still be sent to you. Please submit any questions through the Q&A function. We will address all your questions in the Q&A portion at the end of the presentation. We encourage you to take notes along the way so that you can keep a running tab of any of your wonderings. Now, I have the pleasure of introducing our fabulous speaker for today. So today we have David Talpalar. David Talpalar is a venture capitalist based in New York City. A former mechanical engineer at Duke University, David has spent the majority of his career investing in software, data infrastructure, and AI or machine learning startups. At Convergent Capital, David focuses on early stage investments across supply chains or logistics, financial services, and healthcare, as well as the horizontal foundational tools that enable the largest sectors of the U.S. economy. So we're going to bring it on over to David to take over for our presentation. I hope you all are at the edge of your seats to hear what we have.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. Appreciate the kind words in the intro, and really great to be here and to be amongst everybody. And excited to talk a little bit about my journey. I will, I think start with just a little bit of a background on who I am and what's led me to this point in my life. And then we'll talk a little bit about, in a bit more nuance, some of the lessons that I've learned along the way, the classes that have inspired me, and of course, want to save plenty of time for questions from anybody who has them. Yeah, great to meet everybody. As Rebecca said, my name is David Talpalar. I am 29 years old. I live in New York City. I work at Conversion Capital. We have an office here in Gramercy in New York, for those of you familiar with the city. And I focus, as she said, on cloud software, data infrastructure, AI, machine learning companies at the earliest stages of building startups. But I didn't start here, and nor did I ever really expect to end up here for the majority of my life. Certainly when I was your guys' age in the audience. So just to give a little background, I am from New Jersey. Ever since I was a kid, I've always been quantitatively oriented. When I was in elementary school, I think when I was like 5 years old, I taught myself how to do multiplication and division. Turned out that I had actually learned an ancient Egyptian method to how folks multiply. I self-taught, just kind of learned it myself. But from there was really the start of a very long journey towards spending as much time in math and science oriented classes as I possibly could. I was fortunate enough to skip a grade in math in my public middle school, and that allowed me to graduate or to finish my high school math curriculum by my junior year. I took geometry, what is it? Pre-calculus, BC calculus, algebra 2. Kind of all the core subjects, and it allowed me to spend my senior year learning multivariable calculus through Johns Hopkins. That was a program that I sought out myself, and will be a kind of theme of today's conversations as well, which is seeking out external opportunities to grow, not just from an educational standpoint, but the social opportunities that opens up as well. I was fortunate enough to get accepted into Duke University, and I attended Duke. My favorite class when I was in high school was physics, especially Galilean motion was just something that I seemed to just really naturally understand and enjoy. And I really appreciated seeing how, math could describe the physical world around us. And so I thought mechanical engineering, when I got to Duke, would be a nice extension of that. And so I ultimately decided to major in mechanical engineering. I did not have the mentorship that maybe would have been helpful to steer me in the direction that I think would have been a better usage of my skill set and interests, which was computer science. I think in hindsight, it was a little bit naive to draw like a direct one-for-one comparison with between physics and mechanical engineering. In my opinion, computer science, at least for me, would have had a lot more real world applications for things that I was interested in. And obviously I'll talk about my interests as we go. But either way, I had an absolutely phenomenal experience at Duke. College, I think in general, is a great time to get to know yourself, to find both people and concepts that interest and challenge you. The other thing I'll note, given that a lot of you high school students will, at some point, grace a college campus, is it's really the last time in your life that you will also be surrounded by like resources that are explicitly set up and exist to help you learn. So take advantage of every resource that you have the opportunity to. That includes spending time with professors, mentors, other classmates, many of whom have years of experience, especially on like the professors and mentorship side. Many of whom have years of experience doing things that are still novel to you, but very interesting to you either in the moment or later on in life. I can't tell you how many times, in the what is it now, 7+ years since I graduated college, that I wish that I could go back and ask a specific question of a specific instructor. But one, I hadn't asked that question, and probably two more. My other critical fault was I hadn't built enough rapport with some of my professors over the course of my time on campus, such that I would be able to go back to them even now and say like, hey, professor, from this specific class, I'm sure you have a really unique perspective on this thing that when I took your class 9 years ago, I hadn't thought about, but now is like a really interesting thing for me that I would love to learn more about. And so what I would say is, ask questions, build relationships, both so that you can learn in the moment, but also so that you build lifelong allies, mentors, that you can rely upon, as you grow up. I think mentorship is one of the most important components of, of success for younger people. It's one of the reasons that I'm always happy and excited to work with the CEE as much as I can. And it's something that, especially as you guys finish up high school, move into college, is something to consider. Um, Moving on to my professional career after I graduated from Duke, I started my career on Wall Street at Citigroup. I was trading interest rate derivatives. I come from a family who has a big background in finance. My dad used to work in finance and then ran his own hedge fund in New Jersey. And then my older brother, actually followed a similar path to the one that I started out on. He, to this day, trades foreign exchange options and other derivative products. Originally at JP Morgan on the sell side, and more recently at hedge funds, as well on what we call the buy side. I thought that that finance was kind of a natural next step for me. Similarly to my mechanical engineering decision, it was also a little bit of a naive one. I ended up having a unique opportunity to move out to San Francisco and pivot into venture capital. And I think one of the kind of core learnings that I had about myself during my time trading interest rate derivatives was what I thought were my interests going in, which was like being highly quantitative. I'm a competitive person. Those kind of things stood out to me as like things that I could really take advantage of in, as an interest rate derivatives trader. What I learned pretty quickly was, that it was really it's a very complex process to learn how to trade interest rate derivatives. But once I kind of climbed that steep learning curve, I felt that my learning was kind of plateaued, and I was kind of doing the same thing every day. And as I took a step back and I thought about, well, what are the best skills that I have aside from being quantitative, competitive? I also happen to think, at least of myself, and I'm sure I'm biased, but I think of myself as a very quick learner and a highly sociable individual. And I felt like those were two skills that I was not necessarily taking advantage of as a trader. And so I had the unique opportunity, as I mentioned, to move out to San Francisco and pivot into venture capital. Still, obviously, as I'll talk about venture capital, still like a very quantitative position and highly technical. But it's also given me the opportunity. It's very highly competitive as well. But it's also given me the opportunity to continuously learn. I think one of the things I like the most about my job is that every experience I have builds upon itself, such that my own personal brand and moat is a function of all the experiences that I've had the last 6+ years operating in venture capital. Every conversation I have is an opportunity to learn about people, about the things that they're interested in from a technological perspective, about different markets, whether those be financial or otherwise. And each of them sets me up better for the next conversation that I have. And that opportunity to continuously learn is one of the things that I love the most about my job. I think what I learned through that process, and of course, I'll talk a little bit more about conversion capital and what I do on a day-to-day basis now. But I think what I learned is when you're early in your career, it's a great time to make mistakes, take risks, and learn about what's most important to you guys. I know the way that I just framed it was, I started in a job I didn't like, and then I found a job I liked, and I've been doing it ever since. But the reality is that when I started my career in venture capital, I had no idea if I was going to like it. I knew why theoretically I might like it. I also knew theoretically why I might not. It's a slower paced industry, for example, than trading interest rate derivatives or public markets. But what I did know was whether I liked it or not, I was going to learn a lot about another ecosystem, another type of job, and what I did and did not like about that ecosystem. And my thought process was, if I love venture capital, great, I'll stay here for as long as I can. And if I don't like it, at the very least, I've learned about another type of job and the things that I do and don't like about that type of job that might best inform my next career decision. And I think when you're younger, you have the ability to take some of those risks, perhaps in ways that as you get older and you start thinking about other things, whether those be financial related, family related, you lose some of that optionality. Of course, that is at its peak, I would say, in college, when you get the opportunity to talk to so many like-minded individuals and professors and mentors, etc. And so just to talk a little bit about conversion capital, some of the stuff that I do, how we think about things. We are, an early stage technology investors. So we invest in startups that are considered pre-seed and seed. For those that don't know, what that means is basically anybody who has an idea on the back of a napkin or is thinking about ideas that they might write on the back of a napkin talks to me, and I can be a sounding board for them to talk through what I think may or may not be an interesting business idea. And we invest very early stage, so anything from a few $100,000 all the way up to several $1 million in early stage startups, and then we help them grow. It's not just about maybe some of you have seen like The Social Network or one of these types of movies, that kind of glorifies building a startup. It's a lot of like operational help around how to think about hiring and how to think about product and how to think about marketing and how to think about who to sell to. And it's one of my favorite parts of my job is the chance to help young founders who are doing things for the first time and building fledgling companies figure out how to be successful. So that's the super high level on that stuff. I did want to talk a little bit about kind of like my personal journey from give the financial literacy component to some of these aspects. I talked about my love for physics. I think one of the things that I love about like all math classes and computer science to a certain extent is that you're always problem solving. And I think that regardless of whether you decide to move into a mathematical field from a professional standpoint or not, this concept of problem solving to me is highly transferable regardless of what field you go in. Not to bash on history majors or something like that, which I think is completely honorable, and in its own right, you learn a ton of really important stuff. But within history specifically, it's a lot of like rote memorization and thinking about things that have happened, as opposed to math and computer science concepts that are a lot more about problem solving and in many cases thinking creatively. One of my favorite math classes growing up was a company called was a class called linear algebra. And in linear algebra, which sounds very straightforward, it's just algebra and lines. It's anything but that. And hopefully many of you will have the opportunity to learn more about that as you continue on your academic careers. But linear algebra was a class where we were given really open data sets, and we had to figure out ways to transfer those data sets into actual items. Statistics, I think, is another class that I really enjoyed and appreciated, and frankly, wish I had spent more time on in college as well. So those were two that kind of stood out, especially as you kind of progress in your academic journey. In terms of like, financial knowledge, which is one other thing that I wanted to touch upon. The only thing that I'll say there, because everybody comes from different financial, backgrounds and points of view, and certainly if people have questions about it, I'm happy to talk about it more. But the best advice that I can give is, especially if financial support and living comfortably is important to any of you guys as you get older. Something that I think is always worth repeating is that people the people are unwilling to get rich slowly. Is really like the best way that I can say it. Everybody wants to do something now, to have money now, to have the lifestyle that they've always dreamed about now. And what you really do is you sacrifice your future when you try to chase something really tangible in the short term. What I would just say is there is a huge benefit and a huge competitive advantage to operating on medium to long-term time horizons, because everybody else around you is operating on short-term time horizons. Everybody's looking on Instagram, everybody's looking on TikTok and seeing what everybody else is doing and how amazing everybody else's life is, wants to compare themselves. Comparison is the thief of joy. And what you end up doing is putting yourself in an impossible position where you're trying to get ahead early in ways that are counterproductive to your long-term personal and financial sustainability. So that's just something to consider, as it pertains to things like student loans and budgeting and credit cards, these types of things. What I would say is they are like, the money that you spend, every dollar that you save and that you have the opportunity to save over the course of your life compounds, and compounding is a very important, valuable tool that goes towards this concept of getting rich slowly that I think is important. So I'm going to stop there for the moment. There's a ton more that I can say about any of these subjects, but I'm happy to stop there and open it up to the extent that there are specific questions from the group or directions that the audience would like me to go.
Thanks so much, David. So if you have a question, go ahead and put them. Oh, they're coming in quick. All right. So first question from Talent. I'm a sophomore in high school, and I've been trading with a stock market game for the past 1 year. Past year. How can I learn about stocks myself so that I could play better or I could be more efficient?
Sure. I think that it's actually really interesting because it's one of the things that is true in the public markets. It's true in the private markets. It's true for me and my job on a daily basis. And it's this concept of what I call a unique insight. Um, Unique insights are the difference, in my opinion, between great traders, great investors, and average investors. Especially in today's day and age, there is so much data that exists, especially on public companies, right? To the extent that you're like trading in the stock market, there's so much data out there. And markets tend to be pretty efficient, even though sometimes they can be a little bit irrational. Everybody else is operating on the same type of data that you have access to, right? And so what we talk about, and I'll make the analogy as it pertains to kind of early stage investing, and some of the stuff that we look at, right, is like, everybody talks about, the three Stanford graduates who just, they were all computer science majors and they're best friends and they're building an AI company and it's going to be the next big thing. Well, everything that I just said about those individuals, three Stanford people who have known each other forever, who are building an AI company and they all major in computer science, any venture capitalist, any investor can figure out that information by looking at their LinkedIn. So none of those things are unique insights. And it's one reason that that archetypical founder will be able to raise like a really good pre-seed or seed round. But it should not necessarily give me any more conviction than the other venture capitalist at the other venture firm. And so the question then becomes, well, what is it about these individuals that I have a unique insight about? Is it like I've known them personally and I know that they are really highly motivated, high integrity individuals who are going to work really hard to make sure that they're successful and that they do better about the people around them? That'll be great. Is it I see something about these individuals that I saw in myself when I was younger, and I really resonated with one component of something that they said, and that's why just knowing how I was, seeing how they think, those are the types of things that I feel like are going to scale really well. There are varying different degrees of unique insights, but I think especially when you're, regardless of what you're investing in, and I always recommend investing like medium to long term as opposed to trying to do things short term. If you look at like a lot of the data, especially in public markets, the data highly recommends that those who make fewer trades are the ones that are more successful, as opposed to those who try to day trade on a regular basis, especially in today's day and age when there's algorithms out there that are competing against individuals who are clicking buttons on Robinhood. You should have the same type of unique insights thinking when you decide what you want to invest in. And that unique insight can be anything from, the example that I'll use, and you guys are actually probably too young to even appreciate this, but like when the first iPhone came out, everybody was like, holy cow, like this is amazing, right? And like, if you look at Apple stock over the course of the last 17 years or whatever it's been since they came out with the iPhone, it's only gone up and to the right. Well, if you were the first person to try the iPhone and you got to see it and you were like, wow, this is awesome, and I think I really love this and other people are going to really love this too, that might have been a really interesting, unique insight if you were early enough to say, wow, Apple as a company is going to do really well and I should buy Apple stock. So, I give that example as a means of saying, like, if you use a product or you have a problem and there's a company that's building something to solve it, the odds are that somebody else and a lot of other people are having that same reaction to that same thing. And especially when it comes to consumer products, that can be your unique insight. And so think about things in the context of unique insights when you make decisions. One of the unique insights that I have sometimes is like, oh, somebody who I really trust has a unique insight that I think is, I'm willing to also invest in this company because Rebecca told me something earlier, and I know that Rebecca is really smart when it comes to how she analyzes X, Y, or Z. And so, I would always tie any like kind of investment decisions back towards unique insights.
Thank you. And I want to build up on that original question. So you're talking a lot about, your unique insights and connecting with the people that you're going to start investments with. Do you How do you identify your next investment opportunity, or are there any like specific characteristics that you notice amongst those like
Yeah.
successful startups?
For sure. Yeah, it's a great question. So, I mean, like the first thing that I think is always really important, I alluded to it earlier, is like this concept that a lot of folks are playing short-term games, and if you are willing to adjust your time horizon and think in the medium and long term, you are fundamentally playing in a less competitive environment because everybody else is trying to play short term. And so, what that means for me, and as it pertains to like the types of companies I look at, I alluded to it, financial services, healthcare, supply chain logistics, these are the areas that I choose to spend my time in. It's not by accident that I've chosen those areas. Across each of those kind of verticals, I have, in my opinion, identified major macro themes, major macro shifts that are going to be pervasive across United States and foreign economies for the next 10 plus years. That, in my opinion, lead to exciting investment opportunities for companies that are helping close gaps or helping take advantage of shifting priorities. And that's like a really important component to me, is that if I get really smart on the macro areas over the medium to long term that I care about, one, it helps me hone in on these types of companies that I'm looking for. But it also, when talking to those companies, gives me a unique frame of reference that perhaps other investors are not bringing to the table because others may be thinking it in the shorter term. I think everybody says in venture that they want to think in the longer term, but the reality is it's not really the case. Even though this time from starting a startup to exiting can be 10 or more years. The second thing that you asked is just like the specific things that I'll look for within those types of companies. And I think like ultimately, I'll use the PG version of this quote, but like I look to do hard stuff with really good people. And so what does it mean? Like what do really good people look like, and why would I choose them to do hard things with? Hard things means like highly complex, difficult problems. That sometimes people have never thought about these problems before. Sometimes people know they exist but thought it was impossible to solve them. And what does good people mean? It's people who have really unique experiences that lend themselves to solve those difficult problems, but it's also really high integrity people, really high emotion, like EQ individuals as well, right? Like I, as a company at Conversion Capital, we work with about 75 founders across the funds that we've invested in. We've spent hundreds of hours over the course of our careers with each of those companies. So I have to decide who I want to spend hundreds of hours with when I invest in a company. I want it to be somebody who's communicative, who's honest, who's high integrity, who I can learn from the same way that they learn from me, and who I get along with. And so I think that like one of the things that I alluded to earlier that I kind of touched on, but I want to expand upon it a little bit, is this concept of spending time with like-minded peers and doing things like I mentioned my Johns Hopkins multivariable calculus class my senior year. One of the reasons that I was really excited to do that was not only to learn about those things, but I was in a class specifically for other high school students who were looking to take college classes and had free time. That in and of itself indexes for a certain type of individual who I wanted to spend more time with. People who were really excited about, STEM, just more generally, to be honest with you, and for whom I could learn from. Because you like everybody, especially in high school. High school can be a tricky time for a lot of folks. People care about things that don't necessarily scale into adulthood. People care about being popular and friend groups and stuff like that. That like aren't necessarily things that people think about when they're in their 20s, 30s, 40s, and beyond. And so what I was looking for was people who were like-minded. And I think that that's what the Johns Hopkins class provided me, was the opportunity to compete with other people, to learn from other people, to ask them why are you here in the first place? Like, why are you guys interested in taking a college class in high school? What are you trying to get out of it? Because it helped me formulate my own opinions and perspectives on what was important in ways that, talking to my friends on the baseball team when I played baseball, they had very different priorities, and I learned a lot from them too, but it was just different from the folks who were interested in multivariable calculus when they were, 17, 18 years old. So I went on a couple different tangents there, but I'll stop there for the moment.
No, it's awesome. It all came together. And it gave me a couple of other thoughts that I want to ask you. Also, shout out to my people in the chat there. Keep questions coming. Put them in the Q&A, because this is a great opportunity to learn more about things that a lot of you STEM folks that are looking to start your own companies or invent. This is a great opportunity to pick a brain. So, all right. So another one is I like robotics. So I'm thinking of mechanical engineering, and also I'm interested in stocks. My question is, how does your mechanical engineering education help you in your finance career? Well, I had a similar question to this, so this is a good one. For a high school student, I feel both are very different fields.
They are. It's a great question. It's one of the reasons that like venture capital in and of itself, and spending a lot of time in like supply chain, logistics, manufacturing, and industrials was kind of a unique opportunity for me. I think like one of the kind of core reasons before I even was able to articulate some of the kind of personality reasons that I thought I would be good in venture. One of the core reasons that I was excited about it is because my two biggest passions are finance and technology. Directly the person who asked this question, Tom, to answer that question, like finance and technology are the two things that I cared about more so than anything else. And so venture capitalism seemed like the perfect intersection of learning about new technology, but doing it from business oriented perspective. In terms of how my mechanical engineering education helped me in my finance career, a lot of it is like, and it gets back to like, how I kind of wish that I had a mentor who would maybe steer me towards computer science, because I don't think that I necessarily use my mechanical engineering degree from the perspective of learning mechanical engineering related elements of building trusses and these types of things that you learn in college in a mechanical engineering major. Not much of that has not really translated for me, and I think part of the reason was I also knew that even when I started my major and as I was going through it, I didn't want to necessarily be like a mechanical engineer professionally, and so I didn't necessarily dive into some of the like mechanical engineering clubs and some of the electives that some of my classmates chose to dive into deeper, who were interested in using their mechanical engineering degrees professionally. So for me, what I got out of mechanical engineering was not necessarily specific to mechanical engineering. It was like it's a very hard, very difficult major, and so I learned discipline and a lot of the quantitative skills that were required in order to be successful in that field. And I got to meet a lot of folks who had a lot of whom had aspirations to be mechanical engineers professionally, and so they didn't necessarily line up with my interests quite as much. But a fair few folks as well. Duke. For those of you who don't know, like Duke tends to have like a pretty robust path into finance, especially. So happened to come across a lot of folks in my major as well who were interested in those types of things, and that's another like secondary component of picking a major that I think is really important to consider. Is it's not just what you learn, but it's the type of people that are also interested in those same in those same subjects. Because ultimately, like people who have similar intellectual curiosities is where you might find your husband or wife. It's where you might find your future co-founder. It's where you might find your future best friend, because you already have that shared interest. And so the question is like, what type of people are you looking for? And I think that's an important component. But just to kind of wrap up on that one, I do think like mechanical engineering and finance are very different. Where they're connected is they are both highly quantitatively oriented, and if you find the rare fields like building and startups or venture capitalism that combine both, it's very rewarding. What you'll find is that like when I was interviewing for like Wall Street jobs, they loved that I was a mechanical engineer because I was different. And when I am speaking with startup founders, they, especially folks who are building like in robotics or industrials, they love that I was a mechanical engineer because they think that I can speak their language a little bit better. The flip side of that is also true, where like when I talk to mechanical engineers, they love that that I have a finance background because I can bring that perspective to their job. And so building these like different sometimes orthogonal, like spiky skill sets always kind of increases your surface area of the type of interactions and positive interactions that you can have with others.
Awesome. I love how you bring up that point about, connecting your different backgrounds to the world of finance. A couple weeks ago, we had a session with Dr. Miller, and he talked about how he transitioned from like computer sciences into finance. And he mentioned the point that when you're interested in finance, you don't necessarily have to have a background in finance, and that could be to your strength. Can you expand a little bit more on that about how, whether or not a math specific background is
Yeah.
necessary for finance?
No, I mean, there are like, if you want to work on Wall Street, for example, there are like quant programs that are definitely more like are more inclined for and really built for like folks who have like math and computer science backgrounds. And if you want to go that route, like you kind of need a math background to go like the quant route specifically. But I even mechanical engineering didn't fall under like the quant track. And so I was in like the kind of broader like trading program when I started my career on Wall Street. I think that the point that you made right around like not necessarily needing a finance background to move into finance, I want to expand upon that across really everything, which is like diversity of thought is always going to be welcomed, right? Like I had folks who were doing the same job as me when I started my career, and frankly, there are a lot of venture capitalists who were history majors, who were arts majors, who were physicists, who were computer scientists, mechanical engineers, math majors. It's all over the place. And I think like every community, every career, job opportunity, company benefits from diversity of thought. And so the question that you have to ask yourself is like, not necessarily the question you have to ask yourself when you're 15, 16, 17 years old, but when you're, a few years from now, it's like, how do my lived experiences best set me up to do the things that I want to do? And if you already know what you want to do, then the question is, well, how can I orchestrate my lived experiences to put me in the best position to be successful? I did not know what I wanted to do when I was 16 years old. I'm, 29. I probably figured it out what I wanted to do, like really strongly, probably like 3 or 4 years ago. So it takes a long time, and I had a lot of experimentation to get to that point. But if for those of you who do know what you want to do, or who have some idea of what they might want to do, whether professionally, personally, or otherwise, the best advice that I can give you is if you know where you want to go, figure out what the best path is to get there, and start investing in your medium and long-term goals, early on, and building that solid foundation to grow.
Awesome. Thanks so much. We'll go over to Sunil's question over here. I'm a rising sophomore interested in finance, math, and tech. I had participated in several competitions. What career opportunities would you recommend for me to explore? Lately, I've done volunteering on tax filing.
I mean, that's great. It's great that you're doing like, volunteering work on tax filing. I think like I can never like recommend enough. Like especially again, I work with a lot of early stage companies who are anywhere from like 1 to 10 people in terms of like company size. So like these are tiny groups. And so I have like a little bit of a biased perspective in that like they're always looking for help. They're always looking for additional resources of people who can help them. And what I would say is like I think it's like I think one of the great things about like early like joining an early stage company or working with an early stage company or starting your own is that you are really creating something out of nothing. And it doesn't always mean that you're almost always it means you're not going to be like there are very few companies that turn into billion-dollar companies when they get started. So if that's how you measure success, you'll probably end up being disappointed. But there are incredible opportunities for success along the way, both financially and also just from a personal growth standpoint. And for me, like that combination of finance, math, and technology is perfectly suited for like the startup ecosystem, because what I've found is that like a lot of like founders and early stage employees index really strongly towards one thing, but very few index really strongly towards all 3 or 4 kind of core components of how you build a business, right? You have to build a business, you have to be like technically strong enough to be able to actually build the thing that you want to build, whether it's hardware, software, or otherwise. You have to be high enough of like an EQ and social person to be able to convince customers, investors, early employees why they should want to be a part of your journey. And you also have to understand how to manage finances, right? Like, how much am I going to charge this customer for the services that I provide them? How much money am I going to ask for from venture capitalists the next time that I go to raise? How many employees should I hire to make sure that I give myself enough, we call it runway, enough time basically before I run out of money or I have to ask for more money? Like, how do I like budget myself, my startup accordingly such that I can hit the milestones that I want to hit before I next have to go out for venture capital money? And so those things, you need all of those things to really be successful when you're building a company. And certainly when you talk about finance, math, and technology, that's kind of the perfect intersection. And the other thing I'll say is, like, it gets back to what I said earlier about taking risks. Is like, when you're when you're in college and you're looking for an internship, or you're 23 or 24 or 25 years old, the high likelihood is that you are, I tell this to my brother as well, who is 24 and is a little too money obsessed sometimes, is I say to him, I'm like, the money that you make when you're 23 or 24 years old is not going to be the money that you retire on. The money that you make when you're 23, 24 years old is going to pale in comparison even from like a net worth standpoint, if that's what you care about. It's like the money that you make is going to be very, very secondary to the experiences that you accrue, the unique insights and learnings that you develop over time. Those are very highly monetizable as you get older. But I think folks, and I was one of them, so I can't, I'm not, I'm not being disparaging when talking about these other fields as well. But like, a lot of folks go into like consulting or finance or areas like this because they're stable, they're considered high status, and I don't know how much necessarily you you learn that's super unique as a 23-year-old. My brother works at Deloitte, so I'm picking on my brother, which I don't mean to do. But like, when you work at Deloitte, yeah, you make a nice salary out of school, and you keep your options open. But you keep your options open for what? Like, he maybe a couple years from now he decides, and I'm kind of using him as a stereotype now, as opposed to like this being who he actually is. But like, he might decide next year that he wants to go work at a startup and get like really interesting hands-on information that can help him figure out like what comes next for him. I would argue, like, why not do that when you're 20 or 21 or 22 as an internship or as a first job, and get that experience, figure out what you like, figure out what you don't like, and keep iterating until you find the thing that you're really passionate about. And along the way, as long as you surround yourself with interesting people and interesting ideas, you're going to learn so much.
I think you make an interesting point about how, especially since, we have our high school friends and some of our middle school friends, that you don't necessarily have to be locked into something right now. They're applying for colleges, but they don't need to be like slated, this is my career for the rest of my life. And having all those experiences help you pivot into what you actually will land on what your future is.
Yeah, the only thing I'll say to that, Rebecca, as well, is like, one of the key takeaways that I hope everybody has today is it's always better to follow your passions. Is the core component of it. It is always better to pursue something that you're deeply passionate about rather than trying to seek status or money or something like that. Even if status and money are like theoretically important to you as you get older, what you're going to find is that the opportunities that you have and that you take advantage of when you are young are going to be the things that you feel compelled to dedicate yourself to. They're going to be the things that you care deeply about. And through that, you're going to open up a lot of doors from a status, money, social circle perspective that may be interesting to you, along the way. It's I think it's a fairly I think it was Steve Jobs maybe who said it. I can't recall exactly, but he always found that, I think it was Steve Jobs. He says, I've found that never in my life have I been able to convince somebody who does not want to work hard to work hard. And the reason for that is, more so than anything else, is like, it's a passion problem. I think everybody is interested in something, and you have to find what you're passionate about, and you have to keep pulling on that thread until you figure out what it means for you. It can be anything. And so that, that's what I would just say there.
I want to change gears for a second and build on what you were talking about, like those communication skills and those like collaborative skills that are necessary in what you do. I know a lot of our kids here, they are interested in the startup side. So, they have ideas, they're interested in STEM, and they want to get into inventing, patent holding, that type of thing. Um, what are some components of like an elevator pitch that you might hear from a startup that would help with the persuasion aspect? What gets you
Yeah,
there?
that's a great question. And it's hard. I don't, we may have to book another hour to discuss all of those things. But, one of the things that I would say is like, even what I just talked about, like this passion component is really hard to fake. And like when I meet a founder, I want to hear the passion in their voice as to why they are doing the thing that they're doing. Like, to be honest with you, like I work with many founders, and a lot of them have dreamed of becoming entrepreneurs over time. But I actually don't like it when I ask somebody, like, why are you starting a company? I don't like, I'm starting a company because I want to be an entrepreneur, or like because I've always wanted to be an entrepreneur, which sounds counterintuitive. But the reality is that, like, if you just want to be an entrepreneur, you may end up picking a problem or a space or a community of people that you intend to sell to that you don't actually really care about. And at some point over time, whether it's in 6 months or a year or 5 years, you are going to get tired of talking about that niche thing that you thought was interesting a couple of years ago, unless you were really passionate about it. So, like, I think that that's the most important thing. It's one of the reasons that, like, with all due respect, like, that like high school students don't start quite as many exciting companies as people who are in their 20s or in their 30s and have a little bit more life experience, because part of it is like, yes, you have to like understand what you want to build for, and you learn a lot of that stuff in school and in professional experience, but the other part of it is like, you don't necessarily know. I certainly didn't when I was 15, 16 years old, what my passions were and what I wanted to do long term. And so I wasn't really in a position to build to get passionate enough about something to build a company, right? Like, you think about the one kind of key exception is like Mark Zuckerberg, right? And what he built at Facebook, built a social network. Like, yeah, when he was 20 years old, he was passionate about like meeting young other 20-year-olds, right? Like that, not to be weird about it, but like that was, what he was passionate about and what he had an insight on. I think it's a lot harder if you're trying to build like healthcare companies or financial services companies or manufacturing companies to get passionate about it when you're really young. So I'd say first find something that you're passionate about, and then the second really important component. There's kind of three. I'll say the first is passion. The second is why you, and the third is why now. So to expand upon those, why you is like, why are you the right person to build this? Just because I want to build. I'd love to build flying cars, but I'm not the right person to build it. I don't have the background for it. So I could walk into an elevator and say, Rebecca, please give me money to build this flying car company. And your reaction should be like, well, you've never done anything even remotely related to that. Like, why would I expect you to be the one to do it? So the why you component is a really important second component. And the third component is the why now, which is usually more so from like a technological or consumer preference standpoint of like, why is now the right time to build this company, this product, right? Social media is a great example of that. Like, the why now is like, everybody's on the internet now, so like these types of solutions can exist. If we had tried this 5 years ago, the internet was still in its earlier, nascent stages. People weren't ready for it yet. You can look at any, Zoom, right? Like, we're all on Zoom today. Like, why? What was the why now for Zoom? Like, yeah, they were around for a few years and they were doing all right, but there was a thing called COVID, which really helped, and stuff like that. And so that's another big component that like I think about a lot, and that it's helpful to convey when you talk about building a company, is the why now. And I also think like it shows a great degree of maturity and complex thought to like preemptively think about those questions, bring them up, and answer them in the context of like your kind of prototypical elevator pitch.
Awesome. So another question that we have here is, how can a student explore STEM interest or even finance interest if their school doesn't necessarily have that subject or teach that subject? Are there any resources you know of?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I can certainly follow up. One thing I'll just say, as it pertains to resources, and if anything that I've said has resonated with anybody, we do have, Conversion Capital has a website, and on our website we have a job board for all of our portfolio companies, all of the internships they offer. I know great companies like Palantir, which offer internships and like full-time positions to people who are out of high school who either want to forego college or want to do something in addition to college. And so those are a couple of things that I think are worth looking at from that capacity. The reality is there's so much out there that like it would be I would be remiss to highlight one thing specifically that I think folks should be doing. There are communities online. There are in-person communities, and I strongly suggest folks do as many in-person things as they can. That not to change the subject, and I'll get back to your question, but like as it pertains to my own job, I can tell you that there is a huge advantage, a huge benefit across everything that I do. I talk to startup founders, I talk to other venture investors, I talk to CEOs at big companies who are looking for technology companies that I speak to, and so I help them. Everything that I do in person builds a significantly stronger bond, a significantly stronger impression, and I learn more in person than I do virtually. So that's one thing, especially like when you talk about competition and giving yourself a leg up on the people around you, because there are a lot of really smart people who are trying to, who are asking these same questions and thinking about them. Is like a lot of people are going to be lazy. A lot of people are not going to be socially confident enough to put themselves out there and to do things in person. And it is a huge advantage. That also compounds over time. Um, there are great classes online. MIT, I believe, publishes all of their like computer science and related coursework and lectures online. There are some really interesting. There's some really interesting like blogs that exist that are specifically around individuals who took those classes online and who created their own like curriculum and study guide and schedule and all these types of things. And those are great tools. A lot of those things exist online now, which I think is great. And you have to find that right balance of like uh, learning as much as you can and also like seeking that social engagement. It's one of the reasons that like I think you guys, everybody who's in middle school and high school right now is really kind of lucky in that you're coming up in an age where like there's a ton of like new technology, which is one really exciting. I know everybody probably is familiar in some degree with like ChatGPT and some of these AI tools, but you also don't have to deal with COVID and some of like the COVID restrictions that some of your peers who are a few years older than you had to deal with. And it lends itself to just like a ton of opportunities to learn and a ton of opportunities to grow. I saw somebody say something the other day too, which is like, well, if everybody is using ChatGPT these days to summarize everything that they've read, or that they, for Spark Notes and for to summarize what they've read and to write for them and all these other things, there is huge value in people who are willing who are willing to go the extra mile and do things slowly, getting back to my medium long-term horizon, and read books and be voracious readers and get into the weeds of subjects that like ChatGPT probably could answer, but isn't going to spend the time answering because people don't think creatively and ask enough like in-depth questions because they don't follow their passions enough. And so, there's kind of a little bit all over the place, just as different things kind of came to me. But I think these are a few of the important considerations that I'd recommend.
Now, I like how you brought up the aspect of ChatGPT because I had some thoughts about, as it becomes more of a tool to generate or consolidate your ideas, how does that affect, getting these pitches if someone is generating their pitch via AI? Like you said, it's probably very hard to show that you're passionate about something if
Oh yeah.
AI generated it.
there are some crazy tools coming out these days. There are tools, maybe some of you guys have seen them already, that that you can put in a Zoom with you, and that will basically respond to the prompt that somebody asks you and like tell you what to say, even if it's like not like, just based off of like the data that it has. So you can, there's some pretty wild tools, and I don't want to give them too much publicity here because I think that they're net bad for society, even if they're kind of cool tools to see. Goes back to the in real life component of things, right? It's like, you guys have no idea what's on my computer screen right now. And I promise you, I'm looking at Rebecca and at the slide, but the reality is that like, I could be, playing a video game over here for all you guys know. And like, I think that there is like an inherent level of trust that is hard to completely garner over the course of like a Zoom phone call. And so like, we have a rule that we don't invest in founders that we haven't met in person. And that's always been our rule. It's not like an AI rule specifically. It's just like a general rule. It's like, you learn a lot about people in person that you don't necessarily get to know about them, over Zoom. And so that's a critical component of it as well. And the other thing is that like, there are, especially when you're talking about like, we do a lot of B2B, and B2B is like business to business. So we don't do quite as much like consumer, right? Is what it's called, D2C, direct to consumer. We don't do quite as much consumer, which is like you're building an iPhone app or something like that anybody can use for like, day-to-day applications. We're more so focused on like B2B companies that are building software and services and solutions for other businesses. A lot of business decisions are real. I mean, like, I'm 29, right? Like, a lot of business decisions are old, or, a lot of people who make business decisions are older than me. Most of them are, and even in my age, because I grew up in like a pre AI era, like, people like want to meet the person that they're buying something important from, right? Like, and so the better that you are, the more comfortable that you are at having those types of conversations in person, the better it sets you up for for future success as well.
Awesome. Thanks so much. I think we got time for one more question. This one might be a little bit of a toughie, but it's, what can a student do today that can positively benefit or set them up for financial stability?
Wow, that's a great question. The like this is like, it goes back to what I was saying earlier. To be honest with you, like, I thought about it. So just when you asked that question, my immediate thought was like, all right, well, if I was a middle school student, if I was a high school student, like, maybe I made some allowance and I got a couple $100s in my bank account or something, and I could like start learning about investing, and I could start learning about like, savings and all this other stuff. And I thought about it, and then I took a half step back further, and I was like, well, if I take my own advice, that the money that you make when you're 23 years old and you're a fresh college graduate, or you're 18 years old and you're a fresh high school graduate, that the money that you make at that age is not going to be what you retire upon. Then I think about like, well, how do you actually make yourself, how do you best put yourself in financial decision, like the best financial positions long term? It's becoming so smart at like the things that you care about, or like the things that the world cares about, such that you become an indispensable asset later in life. I don't want to, I don't want to, I'm never recommending this for anybody, but like, if the if Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg or one of these multi-billionaires decided tomorrow to like burn all of their money, and they were as broke as their name, right? Like, they had nothing to their name, they could go out tomorrow and make a lot of money immediately, because they have a wealth of experiences and of knowledge that you can never take away from them. And I think that that will be true of anybody in any field. Obviously, maybe not to that extent, but like, I use the most extreme example as a basis for having like the much more grounded conversation of, if you really care about computer science, like if you're interested in computer science and being a software engineer, and you work as hard as you can today to be the best software engineer, so that 7 years from now, people have to decide between you at a bigger salary number or somebody else at a smaller salary number, and you're that much better than everybody else, they're going to pick you because you're irreplaceable. And if you're irreplaceable, even if you have nothing to your name, like you are setting yourself up for long-term financial success because people will pay you for unique skill sets always. And so like to be honest, like you're not gonna become rich overnight at 17, 18, 19 years old with almost no exceptions. And so the best thing that you can do is invest in yourself to put yourself in the best position to be successful in the future.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Love that because it totally ties into your takeaway points. Follow your passions, ask questions, and be curious.
Absolutely. I mean, like, listen, I was on the other side of this table, 15 years ago when people were telling me like invest in your education, think about things long term, and like I think I did a pretty good job. Could I have done better? Absolutely. I think I did probably better than a lot of people around me, but there was absolutely room for me to have done better. But I used to roll my eyes at people who were like, invest in your education and like don't worry so much about like investing when you're 16 years old. And my guess is like some people who are either on this call or who listen to it back, when it's on YouTube or wherever it may be, maybe have the same reaction of like, oh, like, oh, somebody else who's telling me that I need to spend more time reading, like this was helpful. But the reality is that like those of you who do take this advice and who have heeded it from other people as well are going to be the people in general who, in my opinion, are like best set up for short, medium, and long-term success.
Awesome. Thanks so much for that. If any other questions come in later on before the recording is ready, I can email them over to you if you want to answer those, and then I'll include them in the recording email response. Thank you guys all for coming through. We're going to go into our wrap up for our session. Thank you again, David, for joining us and giving all of that critical information. I think I found it so fascinating.
I'm more than happy to. Thank you so much, Rebecca, for having me. And yeah, I really appreciate everybody's thoughtful questions as well.
All right, so as we close out, we'd like to thank all of our sponsors for our programming, including the Claude Moore Charitable Foundation. Without our sponsors, we'd not be able to provide this cost-free programming to you all. So thank you again to all our sponsors. Thank you to our audience here today, all of the people that came through. Remember, fill out the post-webinar survey. That's the way I check out your attendance, and that opens you up for more opportunities as we go along. Sign up for our final webinar of the season, Step into STEM with Anush Patlola. And if you have a chance, please fill out the survey that I put in the chat at the beginning of our webinar, our summative survey. It just helps us create even better services and programming for you all. Again, thank you again, David. Thank you, everybody. It's been awesome.